Hello and welcome back to my blog. Tea Leaves, Part 16. John Andrews, an eyewitness in a letter to a friend, relates particulars not elsewhere mentioned. While drinking tea at his house, he heard prodigious shouts and went to the Old South Meeting House to ascertain the cause. The house was so crowded, he says, that I could get no further than the porch when I found the moderator was just declaring the meeting to be dissolved, which caused another general shout outdoors and in, and 3 cheers. What with that and the consequent noise of breaking up the meeting, you'd thought the inhabitants of the infernal regions had broke loose. For my part, I went contentedly home and finished my tea, but was soon informed what was going forward. Not crediting it without ocular demonstration, I went and was satisfied. They mustered, I'm told, upon Fort Hill to the number of about 200 and proceeded 2 by 2 to Griffin's Wharf, where Hall, Bruce, and Coffin lay. The latter arrived at the wharf only the day before and was freighted with a large quantity of other goods, which they took the greatest care not to injure in the least. And before 9 o'clock in the evening, every chest on board the 3 vessels was knocked to pieces and flung over the sides. They say the actors were Indians from Narragansett. Whether they were or not, to a transient observer they appeared as such, being clothed in blankets, with their heads muffled, and copper-colored countenances, being each armed with a hatchet or axe or pair of pistols. Nor was their dialect different from what I conceived these geniuses to speak, as their jargon was unintelligible to all but themselves. Not the least insult was offered to any person save one Captain Connor, a letter of horses in this place, not many years since removed from dear Ireland, who had ripped up the lining of his coat and waistcoat under the arms, and watching his opportunity had nearly filled them with tea, but being detected, was handled pretty roughly. They not only stripped him of his clothes, but gave him a coat of mud with a severe bruising into the bargain, and nothing but their utter aversion to making any disturbance prevented his being tarred and feathered. Many interesting details are supplied by the reminiscences of the actors themselves long afterwards. In the Recollections of a Bostonian, published in the Sentinel in 1821-22, the writer says he spent the night but one before the destruction of the tea as one of the guard detached from the new Grenadier Corps in company with General Knox, then one of its officers, on board one of the tea ships. He heard John Rowe suggest to the meeting in the Old South, "Who knows how tea will mingle with salt water?" A suggestion received with great applause. He further states that when the answer of the governor was reported to the meeting, an Indian yell was heard from the street. Mr. Samuel Adams cried out that it was a trick of their enemies to disturb the meeting and requested the people to keep their places, but the people rushed out and accompanied the Indians to the ships. The number of persons disguised as Indians is variously stated. None put it lower than 60, nor higher than 80. The destruction was effected by them, and some young men who volunteered. One of the latter collected the tea which fell into the shoes of himself and companions, and put it in a phial and sealed it up, now in his possession. The Hall of Council is said to have been in the back room of Eddy's printing office, at the corner of the alley leading to Brattle Street Church from Court Street. In 1827, Joshua Wyeth of Cincinnati related the following particulars of the affair to Reverend Timothy Flint. Wyeth, then 16 years old, was a journeyman blacksmith in the employ of Watson and Gridley. He says, "Our numbers were between 28 and 30. Of my associates, I only remember the names of Frothingham, Meade, Martin, and Grant. Many of them were apprentices and journeymen, not a few, as was the case with myself, living with Tory masters. I had but a few hours' warning of what was intended to be done. We first talked of firing the ships, but feared the fire would communicate to the town. We then proposed sinking them, but dropped that project through fear that we should alarm the town before we could get through with it. We had observed that very few persons remained on board the ships, and we finally concluded that we could take possession of them and discharge the tea into the harbor without danger or opposition. One of the ships laid at the wharf, the others a little way out in the stream, with their warps made fast to the wharf. To prevent discovery, we agreed to wear ragged clothes and disfigure ourselves, dressing to resemble Indians as much as possible, smearing our faces with grease and lampblack or soot, and should not have known each other except by our voices. Our most intimate friends among the spectators had not the least knowledge of us. We surely resembled devils from the bottomless pit rather than men. At the appointed time, we met in an old building at the head of the wharf and fell in one after another as if by accident, so as not to excite suspicion. We placed a sentry at the head of the wharf, another in the middle, and one on the bow of each ship as we took possession. We boarded the ship moored by the wharf, and our leader, in a very stern and resolute manner, ordered the captain and crew to open the hatchways and hand us the hoisting tackle and ropes, assuring them that no harm was intended to them. The captain asked what we intended to do. Our leader told him that we were going to unload the tea and ordered him and the crew below. They instantly obeyed. Some of our number then jumped into the hold and passed the chests to the tackle. As they were hauled on deck, others knocked them open with axes, and others raised them to the railing and discharged their contents overboard. All who were not needed for discharging this ship went on board the others, warped them to the wharf, when the same ceremonies were repeated. We were merry in an undertone at the idea of making so large a cup of tea for the fishes, but we were as still as the nature of the case would admit, using no more words than were absolutely necessary. We stirred briskly in the business from the moment we left our dressing room. I never worked harder in my life. While we were unloading, the people collected in great numbers about the wharf to see what was going on. They crowded around us so as to be much in our way. Our sentries were not armed and could not stop any who insisted on passing. They were particularly charged to give us notice in case any known Tory came down to the wharf. There was much talk about this business next morning. We pretended to be as zealous to find out the perpetrators as the rest, and were all so close and loyal that the whole affair remained in Egyptian darkness. This is a pretty interesting accounting of the story there. So that's one reason I'm reading this book, trying to find stuff that I never heard about such an exciting and important time in this country's history. More tomorrow. Make it a great day, and bye for now.